With 8 races out of the 17 done, it's as close to half distance in the season as it gets, so it's time for our traditional stock taking of how everyone's doing. As always, if you like these videos without the Noom sound effect, there's a link in the description. Benetton-Renault. Couldn't really be going much better for Benetton. The addition of the Renault V10 Power seems to have been the final piece in the technical puzzle, and between Michael Schumacher's undoubted skill and the team's uncanny knack of getting the strategy right every time, they're quite simply the class of the field. And while Johnny Herbert can't quite match Schumacher for pace, he's acquitted himself well in the second car, taking his maiden win, and certainly looking much stronger than Verstappen or Leto did last year, which means that the Constructors' title is definitely on the cards. For all that Flavio protested last year that he didn't care about it, he presumably wouldn't turn it down. Perhaps the only cloud on Benetton's horizon is that it's looking increasingly likely that Michael Schumacher won't continue with the team in 1995. The off-the-cuff comments about drivers' high wage demands in the press before the British Grand Prix being read by some as an acknowledgement that the German will be on his way to someone with deeper pockets. Tyrrell-Yamaha. By this time last year, Tyrrell had 4 points finishes including a podium, so 1995 has been a big disappointment. A technical dead end in the form of hydro-link suspension hasn't helped Uncle Ken's team, but the bottom line is that the 023 chassis just isn't as good as last year's 022. Mika Salo impressed in the opening couple of rounds and has been just out of the points a couple of times, but Katayama, such a revelation in 1994, has had an awful first 8 races, with 3 spun-offs and a collision. Apparently the newly mandated higher cockpit sides aren't a great fit for the 5'5", 165cm Japanese driver, while the Yamaha engine in the back is still suffering unreliability issues. Williams-Renault. Still the biggest rival to Benetton, but it's increasingly feeling like that's by default rather than anything else. Hill has had 4 poles, and the car's clearly good enough over a single lap to go toe-to-toe with Schumacher, but the team just don't seem to have all the parts there over a full race distance. They consistently make the wrong call on strategy, the Benetton seems more fuel efficient, which is odd because they've got the same engines, and the gearbox has let them down quite a few times now too, with Coulthard having the bulk of the technical issues. All of that is not producing a particularly harmonious atmosphere within the team, and it seems that Frank Williams believes that the problem is in the cockpit, which doesn't fill either Hill or Coulthard with confidence. McLaren-Mercedes. The first 8 races of the new partnership, McLaren's 4th engine in as many years, could have gone worse, but it could definitely have gone better. At least this time last year, with all the spectacular blow-ups, Hakkinen and Brundle had still put it on the podium 3 times. This year, 4th and 6th at the opening round represent the high point. It's difficult to avoid wondering where the team might be now, if the $10 million paid to Nigel Mansell and the over $500,000 spent rebuilding a chassis to fit him had been deployed elsewhere, not to mention the distraction and acrimony in the garage about it. Not that that's the entire problem. Hakkinen has put himself out with brainless early accidents twice and needs to get a grip, while Blundell can't really concentrate on racing while the team are dithering about his status, and the car keeps breaking. The team are in the unaccustomed position of fighting over 4th, and not only are they losing, but Ligier are coming up on the rails behind them. Footwork-Hart. No money for development means that whatever flashes of pace the team showed at times in 1994 are long gone, and it's a sign of the parlous state of the team's finances that they've had to replace the experienced and rapid driver Gianni Morbidelli, who'd only just scored them a point, with an untried rookie with a bigger chequebook. To be fair to Max Papis, he acquitted himself pretty well in Britain, and if his car hadn't basically collapsed under him, he was on track for a decent finish. Actually, the car has been more or less reliable, about the only thing going for it, with the majority of Inoue's retirements being of his own making. The Japanese driver is finding it tough to compete in F1, and being the second driver in a team that can barely afford to run 1 won't help, but he was noticeably slower than Morbidelli, and even Papis had his number on the first attempt. That single point in Canada, though, will hopefully be enough to secure them the travel benefits and put them on the radar for sponsorship, but it's pretty thin gruel. Simtek Ford. And farewell Simtek, we hardly knew ye. In fact, Simtek's sudden collapse was a bit of a surprise, as not only had the team been comfortably the quicker of the 2 new teams in 1994, but with Jos Verstappen at the wheel, they'd been looking pretty decent in qualifying. They'd endured a nightmare first season with the death of Roland Ratzenberger, but in the process garnered a lot of goodwill within the F1 paddock. but unfortunately goodwill doesn't pay the bills, and the final nail in the coffin was the XTC energy drink sponsorship, which turned out to be something of a con trick. Contrary to what I said previously, the drink did exist, and their website still exists, with last evidence of updates being 2005, but everything about the financials seems to have been a work of fiction. And so Nick Worth and co are brushing up their CVs and looking for something new, and good luck to them. Jordan-Peugeot. Eddie Jordan gambled that Peugeot had worked out most of their reliability issues by the time they were dumped by McLaren, and he looks to have been right. Unfortunately, his cars have been plagued by other reliability issues, and despite usually qualifying well and scrapping with the McLarens for the leavings of the top 3 teams, until Canada they had only managed 1 point finish. That double podium then was all the sweeter, and perhaps it's a shame for Eddie and co that it was so overshadowed by Jean Alesi's win. But the team have a different problem too, and that's that there seems to be something up with Barrichello. He finished second to Irvine's third at Montreal, but he's been absolutely blown out of the water by the Irishman in qualifying so far. He's under a lot of pressure from the Brazilian media, to be sure, but that was the case last year too. But if Eddie Jordan has the driver management skills to turn Andrea de Cesaris into a half-decent racing driver, he can surely help Rubens overcome whatever's causing the yips here. The team deserve better, and if they can just persuade the car to behave itself in the race, they could cement their place as best of the rest come the end of the season. Pacific-Ford. Well, what an improvement from 1994. OK, they still don't look much like scoring points, and the smaller grid means they're guaranteed to qualify, but they're no longer massively hilariously off the pace, and the new chassis is a definite upgrade on the old one. There's still a lot of work to do, of course. Montemini missing Friday qualifying at Silverstone because his brake cylinder was clogged with Swarfiga and they didn't have a spare is emblematic of the sort of problems that the big teams don't have because they have the funds to have a spare and or the staff to go and clean out the brake cylinder in the first place, and the results speak for themselves. Burt didn't finish until Silverstone, and while Monty finished in Brazil, he's only done so once more, and that was unclassified. The two drivers have been fairly evenly matched in qualifying, but like footwork, it's looking inevitable that financial considerations will mean Gachot has to vacate his seat for someone more flush with cash before the end of the season, possibly as early as Germany. Forti-Ford. Pacific's mantle as the hopelessly outclassed team trying to compete with an out-of-date F3000 chassis has been taken over by Forti Corsi, the latest in a long line of teams to find the step up to F1 harder than they were expecting. There are some positives though. The team is relatively well financed with solid sponsorships from a range of Brazil-based comestible suppliers, Arisco Seasonings, Sadia Frozen Foods, Kaiser Beer and Parmalat, all thanks to Dinner's Senior's supermarket empire. And Pedro himself isn't the total embarrassment many were expecting in the cockpit. True, he's generally been behind Moreno in qualifying, but he's been improving all the time, learning his trade, and was quicker in the last 2 races. The low-tech cars are also so slowly, improving, but are still comfortably the slowest things out there, and there can't be many teams who can say that they've directly inspired a rule change aimed at keeping them out of race day. Minardi-Ford. What had looked so promising in the off-season is quickly turning into the season from hell for Giancarlo Minardi, now stuck not only with a car dashed off the drawing board in a couple of months to fit the Ford engines, which are so much less powerful than the Mugen Hondas he thought he was getting, but also an eye-watering bill for those Ford engines back to 1993 as a reward for having the temerity to complain legally about the whole Mugen affair. And then his cars have become synonymous with being mobile chicanes when seen on track. Actually, given the circumstances of its birth, the M195 isn't too bad, still clinging on to midfield status, and 2 7ths and an 8th suggest that they could score a point or two if they get a bit luckier with attrition. Ligier-Mugen Honda. Everything Tom Walkinshaw touches turns to controversy, and this year's Ligier is no exception, from whipping the Mugen Honda deal out from under Giancarlo Minardi's nose, to the accusations that the JS41 is just a Benetton B195 painted blue, well, a different blue, to the rumours of buying Simtek's vacant HQ and moving the whole team lock, stock and barrel to England, to the whole situation about Panis' teammate. After a 1994 debut season largely having the measure of Eric Bernard and handily demolishing Aguri Suzuki in qualifying early on, Martin Brundle's arrival as not only Tom Walkinshaw's golden boy, but fondly remembered by those personnel still around from 1993, must have come as an unwelcome shock. To give Olivier his due, he's given as good as he's got and scored 7 points to Martin's 3 since he arrived, but he'll probably be glad to see Aguri back in the car for Hockenheim and in the Japanese rounds. The team are now equal on points with McLaren just behind Jordan, and the way things are going at Woking and Silverstone, you wouldn't bet against Ligier coming through to go 4th by the end of the season. Ferrari. So tantalisingly close to consistently challenging for wins, the Tifosi can almost smell a return to the good old days. Jean Alesi's emotional maiden win in Canada was a boost to everyone in the team, and the apparently ageless Gerhard Berger has been great too, out-qualifying Jean 5-3, though the Austrian has also been the victim of the kind of Ferrari ineptitude that Jean Todt has been trying to root out, running out of fuel mid-race in Canada, a botched pit stop in France, and his wheel not going on properly in Britain. It's perhaps hardly surprising that Gerhard has had his famous good humour a bit strained of late. Hopefully that's just a blip, and a win for the popular Austrian before the end of the year would be no less than deserved. Next year remains a major talking point though, because Schumacher is talking to Ferrari for 1996 remains the worst kept secret in the paddock, and if the move comes through, it will probably mean all change on the drivers' front. Jean doesn't have a contract for next year yet, and while Berger apparently does have one on the table, he's reportedly the best paid driver in the paddock right now, and the Scuderia won't want to keep that up while also paying Schumacher his reported megabucks, not to mention both current drivers being fully aware of what being Michael's teammate means. Sauber-Ford. The Swiss team hope for great things when replacing the ageing Mercedes-badged Ilmor engines with the Ford Z-Techs that had gone so well for Benetton, but aside from a few flashes of pace from the highly rated Frentzen, it's all been a bit anonymous so far, with HH only cracking the top 10 and qualifying once, mostly hovering somewhere around 12th to 14th. But while he's in the second car, the German is definitely Sauber's lead driver these days. While everyone wishes Karl Wendlinger well, it was clear early on that he just wasn't the same driver as he was before his accident, and maybe Peter Sauber stuck with him just a bit too long. While Jules Bouillon has really suffered in his 3 races from being dropped in at the deep end, though he at least managed to finish at Silverstone. At least the sponsorship from Red Bull seems a bit more solid than their imitators at XTC, and Malaysian oil firm Petronas are also now on the car as sponsors, though the car itself is still lubricated by Castrol, so the finances are solid at least. And that's it for 2025. Have a great Christmas if you celebrate. For the outro music, I looked to see what was Christmas number 1 in 1995, and unfortunately, it was Earth Song. So anyway, here's Wonderwall.
And all the roads that lead you there are winding, and all the lights that light the way are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't.